Okay, so in this video what I'll do is I'll describe a few different settings that I use here at FastTech. Now understand everyone has their own different flavors as I speak of many times, but this is kind of some of the things that I do as I go ahead and do a new release and maybe set the computers up here at FastTech. One of the things in that I'll take you through is, I'm going to kind of go through kind of each configuration, so I think it's very helpful for you to see exactly some changes rather than just explain the changes and you're not really visually seeing what's happening. So I figured I'd go that way direction. So this video may be a little bit long, but hopefully you'll appreciate the reasons for me doing it and set the settings according to what you like. Well, the first thing I have is, it doesn't matter, but I have a solid part on here. Now I'm saying solid because with wireframe it'd be different to see these shading settings. So I have these shading settings that come up, and right off the bat, I've never been a fan of, how these are set. Now I know many of you I've spoke with, you can go up to the top right here and do your selection settings and change these, but I figured I'd kind of go to the configuration directly and show you where those are at as well. The other thing what I'll wind up doing is I'll go ahead and show you about some background settings, and we'll kind of go one step at a time. So let's go ahead and dive in right here with File and go ahead and go to Configuration. With configuration, starting with the Analyze, this is really a precision for all of you to understand, like how much precision you're looking for. An example is if I went ahead and did a home and entity and grab this right here. This is your actual dimensions right here for place precision, and you can kind of see that that's where that would go. And you can change it here as well, but in your configuration you can get that done. I just prefer to leave mine at 4 places. Also, when I go back to configuration, let's really take a look at the CAD setting. I don't do too much with this CAD setting right off the bat. And the reason for that is because it gets to the point where if you start changing some things, you really don't know what the default settings were meant to be anyway. So in this case, I'm going to leave everything kind of the way it is, except for when you're doing some CAD work. If you are working with a lot of solids, sometimes I do like to have those kind of a heavy line width, and prefer to have those there. And just wanted to show you where that can wind up being placed at. What I'm going to go ahead and go right into is the colors. With the colors, that's kind of one of the selections that I think that people go with first is their background color. And when you do that with the start gradient color, if you want to go ahead and do something, for example, like a black background, you can do a black background. If you want to do all black ground, you can just kind of hit that as well, and you can see that you got an all black ground. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to a white up here, and when I go ahead and come up here, I can just type in 111, and that's basically Mastercam's default background, just to let you know you can go by letter or numbers or by colors. In this case, just showing you exactly where it's at. You can change the colors what you want on the fly and see those as well. Now when you're training and teaching, one of the things about this is the calculated field. Okay, so I'm going to explain this a little bit here. So I'm going to go ahead and apply. There's nothing I changed yet. And I'll go ahead and say yes anyway. All right. And one of the things about this calculated field is, especially when you're training and teaching, is you're going to take a look at the parameters, and these calculated fields are in yellow, which are fine, but sometimes in screens they get hard to see with over the blue and things of that nature. So keep in mind these here I change as well, especially when I'm training. So I'll go back in the configuration and I'll start making some changes here. Again, I already explained a little bit about these auto highlights. There's your gradient and start settings, but calculated field, I'm going to go ahead and change this one here just to maybe just a soft white or so. Now every time I go through there and stuff like that, I can hit apply, say yes, and it's going to go ahead and be a calculated field into a white margin. What we'll do is we'll take a look at that again. Let's apply it, go to the parameters, and you can see now I got a white field. And for some of you, this may be a big game changer for your students to go ahead and see the fields a little bit more easy rather than having that yellow. Let's go back into this, and I hover over, and you can see these, this highlight. And I'm just not a big fan about that one here, and I'll show you again where that's at. I'll go File and into Configuration. What I'll wind up doing is we're going to take a look at the Selection tab. Now in the Selection tab, how this works is how things are being selected, whether you hover over them or whether you pick it. And one of the things I try to do is I like to go ahead and just kind of choose off glow highlighting and turn off stipple, and I like to activate my solid by faces. I'll also go ahead and I like to, in my case, again, all preference, keep everything on except for quadrants and nearest, And if you want to change your angle to every 5 degrees or so, you can do that as well. Okay, so that's all right in here. And simply I can go ahead and select OK, say yes to it, and again I'll apply it. Now again, I'm doing this individually so that we can see each changes as it takes place. And when I hover over it, although it does not show that big stipple, okay, and that glow highlighting, it's not bad. It's easy to see, especially again for training and teaching or selecting geometry, but maybe it's not the color that I want. Well, let's go back and change that again. File configuration, and under the colors tab right here, you'll see that I have auto highlight. And I'm going to go ahead and put that to, a color green or so. And when I go ahead and again apply that, it's going to ask me to save it in my settings, which of course I'll show you how you can do your own settings. And let's take a look again at what that would do. I'll go ahead and select OK when I'm done. And now as I hover over, you can see very cleanly that as I'm describing of what I'm selecting, it becomes nice and easy, as you can see that on the screen. So that's one of the things in that I definitely like to change. Let's also take a look at when we go down to this here. I want to explain that the reason why I got backplot on here is because, again, I want to show a toolpath and what you're going to be running into. Well, I like to have all 4 of these turned on, and basically that's going to wind up being your rapid moves, your holder if you turn it off, and your tool, and of course your lengths and so on. Show your tool. But I like to keep all 4 of these on. That's kind of like the way I have to like it. And the reason why I'm telling you that is because, again, I kind of want to change some things here. So the other thing is when you go in 2024, you're going to notice that as you go into your files directory, that you're going to wind up seeing that, your default settings of your machines. An example, if I go down to the simulation, you're going to see that basically it's set at a 5-axis head. And people ask a lot about that setting. How can I maybe make it to a 3 or 4 or 5-axis in defaults? So let's hit a couple things here in the configuration file. First of all, again, for me, is these icons can be very small. Okay, so be very small. So again, I'm not working in order in the configuration. I'm working in order of how I'm looking at things on the screen. So I figured out that, okay, I can change the look of this, which is fine for me. But again, as I'm going in to get ready to do any toolpaths or picking, these look kind of small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply go to the File and go in your Options tab, and what I'd like you to go ahead and do is change this option and make that a large icon, which is going to make this a large icon. Notice that this is a blue setting on the bottom. You can change that to any color you like. I'm going to put this into a teal and simply go ahead and I can apply it. Now, when training, sometimes I'll actually put all my managers to the top, and it's only because people in the back row are easy to see. But by default, I will leave it at the bottom. But you can change this to the top as well. Just make sure that when you do all the changes, to exit out of Mastercam and open it back up, and then you'll see the changes apply to the top. Again, I'll leave mine to the bottom and select OK. Now you'll see that I have this teal. This has been changed a little bit bigger for me. But I still have some problems maybe seeing some things again on the screen. Everything for me is not so much of programming, but when you're teaching and training, how people can see things a little bit better. And you have full control coming over here and dropping this down. Go ahead and go into your background color if you want to change the color. I'm more worried about the font size. I'm going to go ahead and put mine into like maybe 15 or so. You can put it bold if you'd like. Select OK, and now you got a difference in here as well. Okay, so we see some things on here and that will help us out to where we can show the programming. Now keep in mind, many people do like to have this here in this contour top, and that's fine. You can check your planes all the time. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to compress that all at the same time so it looks really clean and it's easy to follow along. So let's go ahead and change a few things here. The other thing I want to show you is really what happens is when you're moving things. I'll give an example. If I do a transform dynamic and take this part for some reason and say I want to go ahead and just move it somewhere, well, we always get this kind of nasty color of result color. Now, some people like it, don't get me wrong, but I'll say copy if you don't mind, and I'll select it. But then what happens is when you do something like this, now you have a habit of always right-clicking and go into the Clear Colors tab, which is up here, and it clears the colors. And I'm going to show you how not to do that again. You can actually move and combine and do the things you want to do without having to keep clearing the colors. So let me show you how that works as well. So I'm going to File Configuration, and what I'll do is I already explained a little bit about the colors. The geometry that you see on the screen, when it changed to that purple color, and you have to keep clearing the colors constantly, that's right here in the geometry display. Turn that off, and that way you don't have to worry about it clearing the colors as you want to keep going. So I prefer to have mine off whenever I possibly can. Some of the other things in that I'll take a look at is if you look at your simulation display, you can really take a look at how your collisions, I like it red, but my fixtures in this case here, I like to see a lot of my fixtures into maybe a deeper gray color, and you can change them here rather than keep changing them into your stock setup every time. You can change them here and they'll go through there. Same thing with your section or your master model color. You can change these however you want. I'll leave these alone. You'll see how this works later. Now the communication is really up to you. If you want to go ahead and change this to any other things you have, you can browse, and if you already have a communication software, you can use that. I'm not really going in depth in the converters. Again, I'm going to leave everything defaulted in Mastercam unless you need to go ahead and do something different. But again, typically the default here runs by pretty well. The next thing I'll do is a default machine. These are when you have your post. And for example, if you're working on a certain machine, it could be a Haas or a Mazak, you can actually just go ahead and pick whatever machine you want. So every time that you or your students open it, it'll default to that certain machine. Mastercam defaults into the mill default, but again, when you open up your mill, you can actually have it automatically go to your mill default and your machine at the same time. Dimensions and notes, there again, I'll cover that later into another video, but again, these are where all the parameters are set at. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. Your files, this is where all your files are distributive. In this case, there's no sense of me changing anything in here as well. Again, maybe a separate video, but for this here is for your component libraries or maybe where your lathe and your setup sheets are. You can always change those wherever you like. In the general tab, not much to change in here unless you have some spin elements that you're using with your space ball or so. On-screen controllers. Again, I'm just going to leave these alone. I'm just kind of going down so you know that I'm not skipping one, but some of these things really I'm not too concerned about. I want to kind of, hit the top topics that I go ahead and change accordingly. So again, your post, I prefer to have it ask rather than just override all the time. That's something I prefer to have, so it always asks me before I override anything. I don't do too much printing. When I do, I usually do a PDF, but if you have theirs, there's where your settings are. Your reports, people ask a lot about what reports do I use. I really don't care for the long, setup mill default of the regular mill. Sometimes I'll choose the, in parentheses, the mill 2. And again, take a look at any of your setup sheets. And you can download some of these to the extranet as well, but each setup sheet will give you a different look. And of course, you'll find out which one you want for you or your students, and it'll work out really well, so you don't have to keep changing them every single time as well. So it helps out a little bit about that. All right, let's go to the screen right here. So when we go to the screen right here, you'll see that I have a couple different things, and in 2024 you'll notice this gnomon. Now, of course, we can right-click and resize it, but if you want to stay in one setting in configuration, this is the gnomon size. You can see you can make it bigger or smaller. You can place it in here. You can also do the text. If you look at the text on the top, you can go ahead and see it that the text will change. Just be careful not to make it too big, of course, or not anything at all. The opacity is right in here. If you don't like to see it a lot, you just want to see your gnomons, you can kind of just pull it out, or you can just go ahead and hover it really to the 100%. To your liking, however you see it fit. If you want to go ahead and do your gnomon size, that's all right here as well as you pull it up. But again, I'm just going to leave these things here, and I just like to go ahead and make sure that this cube that you see in 2024 is something that I would probably keep on. But again, if people do not like it and want to look at it like it's 2023, you can turn that off as well. The selection tab, I've already showed you again of where I would change. So again, I don't need to kind of cover this one again. And what I'll wind up doing is, again, the shading. Again, for a novice, I think all these settings are just fine. Simulation. I really don't want to keep seeing that 5-axis head come on every time I pull it up. Now, because my toolpath's in here, it's not going to change to this default, but when I do it again in Mastercam, I can change these to whatever I want. When you're learning or training, a lot of times people work off 3-axis machines. So again, put that 3-axis so that way it's defaulted. And it saves you again from having you, yourself, or the students keep changing things as you go. When I pull this up, you see simulator here. Here's backplot options. Again, not much to do on this one here. I would say more an advanced setting, as it's not going to go ahead and slow you down at all. The solids I'll leave alone as well. And the start and exit may be something of your choice. Sometimes people really don't like to keep starting off with design. Like if they're drawing, they don't want to have a mill default come in. I kind of like to have it in design. But if you're doing a lot of milling and stuff, you just pop it in and do milling. If you're going to wind up doing a lot of lathe work, then you put the lathe. And what that does, it automatically puts your lathe or your mill over here of your desired results. I'm just going to keep it at design, so I have to force myself into loading a machine. Along with your construction plane, it's what you prefer. I like to have mine always in 3D, so that's what you'll see on here. I have a 3D, and I prefer to have that. And people ask about the editor. You have a couple of editors. One is Mastercam is the default, and if you want, you can also go ahead and take a look at your Simco. You just change accordingly, post something out on the screen, and find out what works for you. Whenever it goes ahead and default Mastercam file name, you'll notice it always comes up t.txt and things of that nature. That's where that default file name is. And of course, you can change that as well. Toolpath tolerances, no need to go ahead and change any of that. And toolpath manager. Now, when I pulled this up, you've seen it had toolpath group right here. So sometimes what I'll wind up doing is I may just type in op1 here. So every time I open up Mastercam, it kind of comes up op1. And the machine group is up here. It could wind up being anything you want. I just leave it alone through this one. But if you were doing milling, you can put milling group or whatever you want. It pops that in here. And that's all it's really doing is popping this names in these orders. So the next time I pull it in, it'll come right up for me. And display options. One of the things I'll tell you that I changed on this one is I really don't like to see the WCS in a tool plane on. Again, if you're not using 5-axis and 4-axis and you get used to this, I really like to have it kept as clean as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and turn these off right here. And the last one would be just regular toolpaths. If you can do this, I like to have my memory buffer about 80%. It just kind of gives me a little bit more to play with on the memory side of it. Now when I'm done with that, I'll go ahead and select OK, or I'll hit the apply button and say yes. And if you want to go ahead and share this with your students or anything else of that nature, you can leave all this alone if you wanted to and always hit save as, and you could have saved it as your own or your student's name. So if you ever come up here and say it like Kevin or so, then hit save, then you can pull up as many configurations as you want. Keep in mind, if you are going to go ahead and change your configuration, when you start this process, make sure that you just save as first, so that way you don't override the defaults of Mastercam. It's always good to back up if you want to. And it does tell you where they're located at right here. If you even go ahead and just do save as, you'll see where everything's located, and it helps you out right here. Okay. So now let's take a look at some of our settings. So what happens is we go ahead and I'll save it off as we are. I'll hit the check box. You can see that now I've got a nice clean as I'm coming over where the settings are at. Okay, that's good. You also go ahead and see that I'm going to use this display. Remember that configuration I set is when it comes up again, but I'm going to right click and do this display option right here so you can see it. And I don't like to go ahead and again, I like to have all these 4 turned off, which gives me a little bit better result when I go ahead and take a look at the machine. So there's your toolpath file name and groups. All these can be changed, whatever you want. If you don't want to see your group comments and parameters and tool numbers, all those things can be changed. But I just like to see some things. And look at that. Really nice. Look at how that kind of looks really clean. And when you want to make a comment, you might want to go ahead and just click on it one time and hit outside. So the reason why I do this is because now I can see easily that I'm doing an outside toolpath without having to go into parameters or having to move my window out so big and so far and things of that nature. Well, anyway, that's what I do with my configurations. And if you take a look at a transform dynamic, you notice that I don't have to worry about, as I do this, that keep clearing my screen. So for example, there's my dynamic. I pull it over, and again, I don't see that where you'll have like a green or a red background. And watch this here. If I hit copy, select OK, as soon as I hit OK, it clears it out. So I don't have to keep clearing those colors. I know many of you go ahead and fight with that. So again, I'll have this configuration saved as well along with the video. And if you want to use my configurations, feel more, that's completely fine. I just want to let you know what my thinking was of what I pick and why I choose what I do, and to help you out. And also keep in mind that when you go ahead and do the files, because this file already existed, again, when I go to my simulation, it's going to be 5-axis head-to-head unless I start a new Mastercam, because remember, this was selected prior to my configuration. But the next time that I go ahead and pull in my Mastercam, this is going to wind up being my 3-axis. My solids and all my pieces will be just the color that I'm looking for, and I don't have to keep doing them by step by step. Hopefully this video helped you, and hopefully this configuration will help you to view and to select things a little bit more easier.